Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. Today, we actually have some very big news in the D&D sphere-averse. Those are words that I'm going to use, I guess. Um, Yesterday, Critical Role and Wizards of the Coast announced their next team-up project, which means that we are getting another book that is set in Exandria, the world of Critical Role, that is entirely canon. Further, cementing Exandria as part of canon, even though it already has been via a couple of different references, including the whole book that was a reference to Critical Role. But we are getting Critical Role Call of the Nether Deep, which sounds like a very, very cool book that they're writing together. It is being released on March 15th. Pre-orders are live, I believe, pretty much everywhere. Wizards has officially announced it, which means that there is you can find places to order it off of their website, and I'm sure that you can place pre-orders at your local stores as soon as today. So if you are planning on picking that up, go ahead and make sure you pre-order it as soon as possible. If you can from a local store, if not, online is also fine. We just like to support brick and mortar as much as we can because we like having game stores around. Hey! um, it is going to be an adventure that begins in Jorhas, which was a major, place in Critical Role Campaign 2, and is going to go across the world almost entirely and land in Marquette, which is the location for their third campaign, which is pretty cool. While we will, have been several months into actually getting to see Marquette in a more detailed light than we did in Campaign 1, um, this book I kind of feel like is serving as sort of like a bridge, like a hype bridge almost, if that makes any sense at all, because they've announced it before the third campaign starts, and it is jumping from the world of the second campaign to the world of the third campaign. So I think that they are really sort of leaning into that. Is an adventure for levels 3 to 12. I honestly don't remember if I said that already, but if I did not, I am sorry. It is an adventure for levels 3 to 12. And the concept sounds pretty cool. It's about this ancient being that has been long forgotten that is now calling out for different heroes and adventurers and spirits and stuff like that, and presumably is going to be wreaking havoc on the world. So, if you are looking to get your hands on that, as far as we know right now, it is going to be the first release in 2022. Again, that is March 15th, 2022. Go ahead and get your pre-orders in if you are looking to pre-order that book. In terms of streams and games that are happening today, we have the next episode of The Seven, Dimension 20's current show. It goes live on Dropout at 7 p.m. Eastern. I don't know why I'm looking into the air for that. I have it written down next to me. I am doing great this morning. Whew. That is everything that I have for streams. But if you are not subscribed to Dropout, first off, it's pretty cheap. So if you want to catch up on that, they have all of their Dimension 20 stuff on there. If you are, really committed, you could probably blow through all of it within a month, and really only have to pay for the 1 month if that's what you're leaning towards. But that is up to you, I guess. Other than that, the Tabletop Tavern underscore, twitch.tv/the Tabletop Tavern underscore, has their final episode tomorrow, which is super exciting for them. Super proud of all the work that they've done on that campaign. It has been a lot of fun working to catch up. Jenny, the Dungeon Master, is a good friend, and I would love if you guys would check out the show, support them, and they will be having another campaign go live shortly following this one. I say shortly. I don't actually know exactly how long it is, but I don't think it's particularly far after. That is everything that I have for news and for streams, I believe, which means that we get to T&D, which this week we have our Cable Knit mug again. It's a very nice mug. And I have a peach lemon herbal tea it smells super peachy and it tastes pretty lemony, which is a fun kind of weird combination because it messes with both your nose and your tongue. That's a weird sentence that came out of my mouth, but that's okay. But that is T&D for you guys today. Um, like I mentioned last week, I believe, when they pushed the release date for Fizzbands back, it threw off my whole October schedule. Just threw it right out the window. I was going to be doing a full horror week the last week, with a full dragon week leading up to it, because it was going to be all dragons because of Fizzbands, and then all horror because of Halloween. And here we are now instead. Everything is off. I'm taking the horror, I'm sprinkling it around in the days leading up to that, and we're working with what we got. All of that is a long way to say that today we're talking about running horror games in D&D. Man, I am in a special mood today, I guess, but that's okay. So, we're talking about running horror games. So this is more geared towards DMs, but players, it is also going to contain a couple of things that maybe you can do to help facilitate and emphasize the horror in different games that your DM is trying to run, if horror is the thing that they are going for. Horror is it is an inherently tricky thing to run in a totally theater of the mind setting, which is why some of these tips and tricks and whatnot are going to involve real life things that are a little bit more tangible than just like description out in the world. But I want to preface this with saying that horror is one of those genres where it can be very difficult for some people, right? There are people who do not like horror at all. There are people who are super into it. The between that is a huge scale that slides way up and down. And with there being so many different types of horror, there are actually types that people like more often, and some that other people like more often. If you are planning on putting together a horror-based table, this is almost more than anything the kind of game where you want to get player input ahead of time, and you want to make sure that you are making your game accessible to your players and creating a space where they will feel comfortable and safe enough to actually explore the world and become vulnerable enough to actually engage in a horror-based game. You do not want a player who hates body horror to be in your like super slasher like mutation bioengineering based horror game, because they're not going to enjoy themselves, and they're going to, through really no fault of their own, drag down the rest of the table because they are the ones that are not having a good time because this wasn't a conversation that was had ahead of time. So accessibility in horror games is a very, very important thing. This is also accessibility as a whole with this, particularly because we're going to be talking about some of the things you can do in real life to help set the mood, essentially. You need to clear with your players ahead of time, or tell them as soon as you possibly can if you know something is going to change about something, because they need to be able to flag it and be like, no, this isn't cool with me. That's a good rule to have in general in D&D, but especially if you are running a horror-heavy game, right? Because, again, horror is one of the more tricky things to run. It's one of the more tricky things to actually interact with. And there's a lot of vulnerability involved with it, both from the DM side, because you are putting out there what you think is going to be a good, scary story, which is honestly more difficult, in my mind at least, than putting out what you think is going to be a good story. And with the players, in allowing themselves to actually like let down their guard enough to engage with this in a role-playing capacity. So I just want to make sure that I really emphasize the accessibility, the conversation, everything that goes with that. You have to be talking to your players, your DMs, make sure there's open lines of communication, because it is super, super important for a horror-based game in particular. With all that said, and all that in mind, that sort of like being the overarching theme for this whole thing, let's talk tips on how to run some horror games, okay? If you are looking to play some horror games, here are some of the best immediate physical tips that I can give you. This is sort of a truncated version of the Von Richten's guide part. Von Richten's is phenomenal. It has a ton of great resources for running horror. So if you are looking to run horror, I definitely recommend checking out that book. But you want to picking a location to actually play the game in is so good for a horror based game. If you are just playing it at a kitchen table, all the lights are on and everything like that, that's great and everything, but it doesn't really set the atmosphere quite as much. But if you get to play on like somebody's back deck or something, after the sun has gone down, it's darker out, you are out sort of in the open. If you can play like in the backyard, if you can have like a fire pit going off to the side or something like that, just sort of like really set the like all think like ghost stories around a campfire kind of vibe. That is the vibe that if you can accomplish it, that is what you want to be going for. Because ultimately, you are still just telling a story. You don't want the players to think they are in a horror game, but you want to like create that same kind of atmosphere so that you can like get into that. Now, if you cannot, play outside because it's, I don't know, winter or raining or anything like that, a space where you can dim the lights is also phenomenal. If you don't have dimmable lights, throwing turning the lights off and throwing up a bunch of candles enough to like easily read by and stuff like that, but still enough to like give the sense that you are in low light because you are in low light. That is another great way to use lighting to affect the atmosphere if you don't have the luxury of being able to just like go outside and hang out outside or something like that. Music is, of course, going to be your best friend in running a horror game because music is going to set the tone no matter what kind of game you're playing, but especially in a horror based game. Plus, if you have music going and then you can like cut it for something, that, I mean, you if you've seen a horror movie, you know they use that trick to suddenly like ramp up tension because all of a sudden all you can hear are people breathing or something like that. Music is going to be one of your best friends. Honestly, probably even more than lighting or something like that. Moving forward from a music, a lighting, and general location, if you are able to do props or something like that, great. Anything that you can hand a player to get them more in character, that's just kind of like, again, a general D&D thing. If you can hand somebody something, like if you have a special pen or something, you can hand somebody a special pen, it's going to be better that way. In horror games in particular, it is probably the most important to make an effort to like eliminate distractions at the table. That means cell phones, that might mean snacks, that might mean drinks, might mean stuff like that. Anything that could take you out of the element, out of the game, you are going to want to try and limit as best as you can. Obviously, if somebody's got like kids at home who are, alone or something like that, they need to be able to get to their phone in case something happens. But do your best, and that's all we can really ask of you. That's a good rule in general too. Do your best, and that's most of what we can ask for you. Sometimes we can ask for a little bit more than your best, but we can't really expect a whole lot out of that all the time because your best is what you got. Moving on from there, we are out of the like physical stuff you can do. We are into kind of like the more storytelling bit of it, because if you've ever seen a horror movie, which almost everybody has seen a horror movie from what I understand, pacing is the most important thing in a horror setting, more than likely. Yeah, having a cool, creepy villain is great. Having a cool, creepy setting is great. But if you're just like bam, 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 you don't give the players enough time to sit in what you are actually telling them, right? So, you don't necessarily need to like make it super gritty and real to make it horror. You just need to be able to pace out the game in the right way. That means that in those moments where you want to like build out the tension, make sure you give like these really deep, like woven almost descriptions of the things that are around them that are happening. If you can get sound effects in here, great. If you can make them like with your mouth or whatever, and it's not going to be like overly comical and totally take people out of it, great. But also, we applaud you for doing the best that you can because DMing is hard. So do what you can. The Another thing is that obviously horror does not need to be based in reality, as Dungeons and Dragons is not based in reality as well. But being able to actually like do things outside of reality, keeping the game mostly based in that reality, but then adding in elements of just the surreal are phenomenal. The example in Von Richten's guide, like the first example in Von Richten's guide, is waking up from a dream, like a super prophetic dream with like a scar on your chest or something from where you've been stabbed or slashed or something like that. And that is a fantastic example. That obviously wouldn't happen in real life, but it can happen in game, and that puts the oh no, like fear of whatever that thing is just deep in the player, deep in the character, right? Um, Keeping along with pacing and this sort of reality break almost make it seem like time is stretching and shrinking in front of them, right? Like those illusions where the hallways get longer and shorter and longer and shorter, work that in your storytelling, because that is honestly going to be what really drives home your like the actual horror of the thing. uh, those quiet moments should be stretched thin almost, in like a very tense kind of way, not just like, oh god, we're so bored, we're still here, but like take those like those quiet moments and drag them out into what become these long, like almost like translucent sheets that you think you see something moving through. That's a weird analogy, but I think it kind of works. Like you should be making an effort to fill those times with a lot of tension. And then when the tone shifts and something hits, an event happens, you got to go bam, 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 bam. Move forward as fast as you can. Do not let them like stop and talk and strategize or stuff like that. Like get them moving. Split the party if that's what happens. Splitting the party is a really great tool for like increasing tension, increasing horror, because everybody knows you don't split the party. Um, but get them moving. Your description should be quick and snappy, very vivid though. Um, think like hard colors, like heavy saturated colors, loud action words, and this is another great place for sound effects. Instead of just saying you hear an explosion, maybe you actually hit them with like a kind of thing or something like that, or you have a button next to you that you hit it and an explosion sounds. Um, but get people moving, get people going. Um, and then I talked about splitting the party real quick. I'm going to jump back to that. If you split the party, do not. The only time they should get strategizing is when you are running the scene for the other part of the party, right? And even then, they should be so engrossed in what's going on that they don't really have time to think and strategize. You want to be snapping back and forth between them pretty quick, because you want this pacing to stay the same for both of them. You don't want to like suddenly have, okay, well this side of the party is getting 10 minutes of time, and then we're going to shift over here and they're going to get 10 minutes of time, because then you're doing a lot of like time hopping backwards, and that's not what you want to do. um, if they are running from like the let's say right, you have some scary twin people. They're like tall, like all cloaked in tattered black and gray robes, and they've got these like giant scythe arms or something like that. I don't know. Think like something out of Bloodborne. If you haven't played Bloodborne, phenomenal game. Not the point. Um, there are two of them, right? They chase the different halves of the party down different hallways. You should snap back and forth between them, because as one of them advances, the other one is also going to be advancing at the same pace the whole time. And it's just a matter of making sure everybody's getting their beat in. It can help to roll initiative here and actually run it in initiative. And pairing with an initiative, and this is one of those things where you're going to want to make sure you get players okay, because it can trigger like anxiety attacks in people if you are not careful. A large like either stopwatch or hourglass or something like that you could slap down in front of them on the table, be like, this is how much time you have to tell me exactly what you're doing, and then you move on. I really like doing that whenever it comes up. It doesn't come up a lot, but when it does, it's a lot of fun. My players freak out a little bit, but not in the have an anxiety attack kind of way, in the oh god, oh god, oh god, let's do it kind of way. The last thing I really want to hit on is the importance of safety in horror settings. It sounds counterintuitive, but if everything is out to kill you, then what is really scary ultimately, right? It is so important to have whatever small amount of safe haven, be it a person, a place, or a thing. I just named the nouns person, place, the thing. But like maybe it's a person in a place or a person with a thing. Like maybe somebody has a traveling cart or something like that that for whatever reason is magically prevented, like the bad guy can't see into it or something like that. There should be this little like dot of hope, this little beacon of light in their world that they think they can go to for safety. Whether or not they are actually safe, that is a different question entirely. Make it logically make sense as to why they are suddenly not safe in this place where they have been safe. But maybe they're not safe all of a sudden. That is not to say this person should betray them, because honestly, if everybody's betraying you, then why would you ever trust anybody? And then they just kind of stop engaging with the world a little bit and they check out. But this person who would not betray them can't necessarily keep them safe, but they are offering them an amount of safety. And that is very important. Holding on to that little bit of hope is very, very important in a horror-based game. And you should make sure that you give your players just the right amount of hope. Like, just a little bit. Not enough to make them think that they've got, like, it in the bag, but enough to make them think that they're not all gonna die immediately. So, make sure you give your players just a touch of hope in the middle of your terrifying, horrific, mind-numbing game. Mind-numbing is the wrong word. You don't want it to be mind-numbing. You want it to be mind-like melting. Not the point. That is everything I'm going to talk about for running horror games. There is so much more to go through, obviously. There is so much to go through from Von Richten's alone. But this is what I have found from running horror games, what I have read about from other people running horror games, what I've read from Von Richten's, all of that sort of stuff. Again, it is a truncated version of Von Richten's, really, ultimately, that I just talked about, because they do a really good job in there of really summarizing a lot of stuff. They expanded on a genre, essentially, in one book that is like 200 pages long. And they do a great job of it. But, like I said, that is everything I have to talk to you guys about today. So, thank you so much for tuning in and making me part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. I am pushing this show out every single weekday for as long as I can here until the end of the year, is the plan for this season, quote unquote, if you will, and then we'll figure out what we do after that. Thank you so much in particular to my patrons, who are the ones that make this show possible more than anything else. I very much appreciate you. I love you. Thank you so much. I believe that is it. Yep, that's about all I think I've got for you. Make sure you follow along so that you don't miss anything. That is the part that I forgot about this outro. Make sure you follow along so you don't miss anything. And until next time, keep on rolling.